a week, but for each year of the contract. And he couldn't get the board to come up with that enormous sum of money. So the way he did it was he said, look, how about if you give me the extra $5, I'll give it to the orchestra in the form of a recording guarantee, and we can get something for it. So that's how he talked him into coming up with the additional $5, which was necessary to solve the contract. And
so essentially, it was an joint invention of you and Peter Pastrach.
Correct, correct. And you know, and he had to do that because he knew that we would go on strike. You know, between 1966 and 1978, there were, let's see, I think there were 6 contract negotiations, and we struck on 5 of them. The only reason we didn't strike on the 6th is because of the Nixon wage price controls. You couldn't strike.
Right.
So, I mean, we would go on strike every negotiation. So he knew he had to have that $5. So he did it as a recording guarantee, and I suggested, I said, well, why don't we just do it as a media guarantee? You never can tell. We might get some television or something. So, you know, we did do that. And but we were, to the best of my knowledge, we were the first orchestra, especially in our tier, you know, to do that. Because the other orchestras like Chicago were resistant of guarantees. They didn't want guarantees. Just Philadelphia. And so we did that, but I could remember when the price of a 3-hour session went to $100 for a 3-hour session, and the English were like rejoicing because they figured that they'd get all kinds of recording work because we were pricing ourselves out of the market. And the cry in those days was, well, they live in England and we live in the United States, and in those days the dollar was very, very strong. Right. So, you know, it actually, you know, cost more to live in the United States than it did in England. Right. It's the reverse now, of course. Right. But so there were all those reasons for that. But so we did that, and you know, that seemed to calm things down. People that wanted to record instituted media guarantees, except the very biggest, best-funded orchestras who, you know, insisted on being paid for them. And by 1990, then in the late 80s, the technology change happened where we switched over from LPs to CDs, and the recording companies went crazy. They were re-recording the entire literature. So, I mean, orchestras were recording like mad. I mean, before I came on this trip, because I knew we were going to talk about this, for some reason, I saved my pension payments going back to 1975. And I looked at my pension payment for 1990, which would have been the height of the CD craze, and my wages for recording were $10,000.
Wow.
That was a lot of money in 1990. But I mean, we were doing an enormous amount of recording, way over our guarantee. Right. But that's how much the companies were recording then. But then, of course, the boom busted, and then nobody wanted to record anything. And you know, we discovered that with digital technology, once you recorded something, it was good forever. Yeah. And all they had to do was, you know, reformat it and release it in a new format. One of the big mistakes looking back that we all did was we sold our rights, you know, for the upfront money, and we should not have done that. We should have kept our rights like our agreements are written now.
Right. Well, that was, in fact, what I remember learning from you was just that whole thing about how the recording company's interests were not ours. And Correct. We were, I think you described it as our artistic history, our artistic legacy was right. being sold off, and we didn't control it.
That's right.
I remember you had a story about, was it the Philadelphia Orchestra had gone to Europe and complained that their discs were not on?
Right.
Tell that story.
Well, no, it was they went, the recording company, they were trying to get the recording companies to set up at their concert venue sites and sell recordings like any garage rock band knows to do. But EMI couldn't figure out how to do that. And so they rained all over EMI, so EMI finally said, okay, and they showed up in England, but the recordings they were selling weren't recordings of the Philadelphia Orchestra. They were recordings of the London Symphony, which made the Philadelphia Orchestra even
right.
madder.
But EMI didn't care.
No.
They were EMI recordings.
Right,
They
they were
selling them.
EMI recordings, they could have cared less. So, we should not have done that. We should have maintained control.
So how did you, as chair of the media committee, how did you begin to engineer the change?
Well, I knew that there was no way that we could save CD recordings. I mean, first of all, CD recordings, just dropped off the map. And all of that had been done. But I went, you know what? For stuff that we do on internet, and from now on, it is a valid trade-off to trade off upfront money for ownership and control, or control especially, if not ownership. And that's what we started to do. It was already being done to a certain extent in the AV agreement, but it was as you know, then you negotiated that. The two of us negotiated that agreement together. The internet agreement was the first agreement where we really had a lot of control. We were not giving away the control of our product. The most we could do was license it for a certain period of time.
Right.
And in fact, I mean, you'll be interested to know that just this year, we are actually making a CD this year. It's for Non-Such, which has this one modern composer that they have everything he's ever done. And we're doing the Dr. Atomic Symphony, so they wanted that.
Oh, so John Adams.
John Adams, right. Yeah, John Adams. Well, originally the Dr. Atomic Symphony, which was, extracted from Dr. Atomic, the opera, was supposed to be 40 minutes long, which they went, okay, 40 minutes, is good enough because while it won't fill a disc completely, it's long enough. Well, he ended up cutting it to 20 minutes. So now we're having to go back and record another one of his pieces to fill out the rest of the disc. Right. But we got a copy of the agreement from the parent company of Non-Such. It turned out that Non-Such is owned by, I don't know who they're owned by. They're probably owned by somebody different this week. The companies just, they sell and trade off all the time. But the manager of the orchestra called me in and he read me the contract, and it was like a contract from the 90s. And I told the manager, you can make an airplane out of that contract because there's no way that we're going to do it. Yeah. If I have to go back and get another vote out of the orchestra, we're not giving away those rights. Not only that, the contract doesn't allow it to be given away. Right. You write that bean counter and tell him we'll be glad to license it to him for 5 years, but that's it. Right. We're not giving it to him in perpetuity if hell freezes over. Yeah. So he called this guy at the recording company, which, as you know now, is mostly bean counters. They're not like the old record execs who actually knew something about music. And this guy was like, oh, well, then we just won't do the recording. And my manager said, well, okay, it's fine with the musicians. So then apparently somebody got involved and straightened this guy out, that we weren't going to give away the rights forever. But that was actually a proud moment for me where I went. I finally told, I think it was, I don't really know what company it is now. They've all changed so much that, I finally told them, no, we're not giving you this in perpetuity. But, during that whole time, I mean, we were negotiating stuff like, one time the Federation came to us and said, the companies want some language about chamber music recording. And we said, what do you mean, we're symphony orchestras, we're not chamber music. Well, you're classical musicians, so you got to write this language. And we said, those chamber music groups don't want, they disappear in the studio and you feed them raw meat for a week and they make a recording and they come out. They don't want to hear from nothing about, 4-hour sessions, 3-hour sessions. They could care less. That's not the way they do business. No. The companies have got to have. So I remember we wrote some chamber music sections, and I was touched because I got a call from a chamber music guy who said, well, I'm glad the union has finally put a stop to those endless sessions. So here we thought that's what they wanted to do, but apparently not all of them wanted to do that. But, we did that, and we were constantly trying to figure out ways to record a body of the literature that was almost impossible to record under the old agreement because of the 2-hour minimum rule. For those of your people watching this that don't know what the 2-hour minimum rule is, every member of a symphony orchestra gets paid the first 2 hours of a recording session, whether they play or not. And that